we're definitely in a reunion phase, if you want to think of it like that, where we are reintegrating into society, of course, into the new normal. So what is interesting is the mixed attitudes that I'm sure we all are experiencing. So on the one hand, we are very hopeful and excited to get back to seeing people, to interacting with people, to get back that form of human connection. But on the other hand, I think we all experience a bit of apprehension because, have you ever found yourself feeling a little bit uncomfortable, when you have a coffee and you slightly remove your mask, when you step into a meeting and there are maybe 5 people and, you're feeling a bit nervous because now you're sitting in a closed off space. So the term that I was reading up on that was very interesting was reverse culture shock. So it's a term that actually is normally used for soldiers. So when soldiers go abroad, to fight a war, they spend quite a significant amount of time away from home. By the time then they return home, they are actually the normal that they were so used to now all of a sudden feels weird and they feel a bit out of place. And I think, like you said, abnormal. And I think that is so true to what we might be experiencing at the moment. So I think, to answer your question, for companies, that's an important thing to recognize and to realize. We're not welcoming people back who are 100% comfortable yet. We all have been through some form of trauma with COVID, and we're coming back to the workplace maybe not at 100% yet. So I think 2 very significant points from a company point of view, and of course I'll also discuss, as you mentioned, from an employee perspective. The first one is employee engagement. So I think it's important for companies to ask the question, how are my employees feeling? And not only how are they feeling, but how has COVID affected them? Because companies need to understand the concerns of employees, and employees also need to make known what they're feeling and what their concerns are. So this communication and engagement goes both ways. If we don't address these things, how can we support each other in that? So I think things on a practical level, like a survey, would be a very good idea at this time. And then also, of course, in asking people how they feel and in them giving honest responses, you might find that employees are actually feeling a bit detached from corporate culture. So they're coming back. We've all gone through this phase of feeling lonely and isolated, and I think from a company perspective, it's important to really almost realign people with the company's values, their mission, their vision, and almost to focus on team cohesion. So why not do something like a reintegration program? It's like an induction, like you would do for new employees, but of course we're not dealing necessarily with new employees. We're welcoming back people who were working remotely, or even just who have been under a lot of stress. We're welcoming them back, and we're trying to check in with people on how is your reintegration going. So that's on the company perspective. I think another good idea would be to do a team building. So you want people to really reconnect with their team, to get back a bit of that team spirit almost, and for them to almost rekindle their relationships that they had with their colleagues. Of course, remote work is a lot easier when you have known your colleagues before starting your remote work. You might see that some of your team members might be new, they might not know each other. Team building is good for that. So that was employee engagement, and the second thing, of course, is support. So here I'm speaking specifically about managerial support. So managers need to, like I said earlier, understand the concerns of employees, but also understand the emotional landscape that they are walking into, because we know that the stress dynamic of the organization is vastly different than what we've seen before COVID. And the reason for that is, of course, people have new concerns. They have concerns over possible retrenchments, which is very real, and we've seen quite a lot of retrenchments in our country. People have concerns over the future that they have with the company. They might not know what the well-being of the company is in a financial sense. Yes, and they might have concerns over their physical safety. So you can imagine how the average benchmark level of stress is pitched a lot higher now. And even with psychometric assessments, we've seen that the overall anxiety scores for the average person is a lot higher than what it has previously been. So in that sense, I think we need to equip managers from a company perspective to really understand these emotions, to have difficult conversations, and really also for them to almost just keep an eye out for any significant behavioral changes. The employee who used to be very extroverted, lively, who used to connect people with each other now might seem a bit more withdrawn. And in that, managers can help by looking out for signs of not coping with a new routine, of not adjusting well, or of not, managing change in a healthy way. And the key here is to look for any signs of emotional distress within people in the company. Of course, being on the lookout for things like substance abuse will always be very important. Any potential addictive behaviors. This is not necessarily the norm, but we are living in strange times. So we do need to be mindful and equipped to deal with these cases. The first thing for me would be let's guard against a fear culture, specifically in organizations. So companies, please share and be transparent about what's going on in your businesses. Share the health status of your company and the priorities of your companies or of your company. Just as we share possible risks about COVID, we need to share what's going on in the business. Because people act strangely when they act, with this fear culture. It gets to a point where we kind of just cover our own actions, and it's kind of every man for himself. But that's counterproductive, and it doesn't really do anyone good, certainly not the company. The second thing I would say is control the pace of your reintegration. So as you're reintegrating into this new normal, don't have unrealistic expectations of yourself to just jump back into that same routine that you managed to uphold pre-COVID. And here I'm thinking of an example of people commuting between Pretoria and Joburg every day, people who drive a lot for work. Don't just jump back into that. This is a new routine that we are establishing. Don't have unrealistic expectations. And also of others. So expect your employees to maybe make a few mistakes as they reintegrate into, and adjust into the new normal. Expect maybe a little bit of a drop in productivity, because people are dealing with change, and when people deal with change, especially on this level, that is normal, and it's good if we expect and anticipate that. The last thing I would say is, don't neglect to use this as an opportunity for development. So if we look back at COVID, perhaps in a few years' time, we can choose whether we have positive associations or only negative associations with this time. So the questions that I want to leave you with, firstly, is what insecurities has this pandemic brought out in your life? That sounds like it's something worth considering, right? So that's a big question. So I think let's journey on that, reflect on that, and also, give yourself time to and pay attention to your personal development. Pay attention to those insecurities, because you might not normally see those being unearthed in quite the same way as we've seen in this past year. And the second question I want to ask you is, what values has COVID taught you? So as we reintegrate, for example, for me, it was really to value a slower pace and to value family. So as we reintegrate, let's not lose sight of those values, because, otherwise, what's the point? We need to, be responsible for our own development and use this as an opportunity. So we're saying, rather than saying, why did this happen to me, let's say, why did this happen for me?